And welcome back. Well, as promised, you can see that we have our 2012 Red Ram, otherwise known as Project X, and or Candy Apple as well in a previous build series. We've got it back on the lift today. We've got it backed into place. And we've got it situated this way in prep for being able to do the work that we need to do in order to pull the engine. And if you're unfamiliar with this truck in the previous series, I will put a link in the description, as well as I believe it'll show up on the right. It'll pop up briefly in the right-hand side of this video as well, in reference to a link that'll take you to the first build series for this truck, in which we went through it after it came here from auction, assessed the damage, and did the necessary repair work to get this particular vehicle back on the road again. And in this particular series, as you may know, if you will know if you are a follower of this series, we're prepping to pull the engine, to do the performance buildup on here, which will include cams, injectors, do an MDS delete. We'll also be supercharging this truck as well. And there's and if you missed those parts videos, they'll be earlier in this same playlist. But what we're prepping to do right now is get coolant drained and basically start to pull the front part of the truck apart, which will be the front radiators, front grille. The hope is to be able to fish this top cross member out, so we only have to lift the engine up to clear the front bumper and pull it out, versus having to lift the engine up to clear the top of the radiator support. We'll also be removing the hood, as we've done with our other 1500s in the past, just to give us some working room. And as we get to it, we'll get closer to it, we'll be doing things like also removing the brake booster, because that brake booster is so close to the driver's side cylinder head on these Rams that trying to pick it up, you would hit into that. So we want to get that up and out of here and out of the way. Now you can see that we've already disconnected our battery and put our patient to sleep for this rather lengthy surgery procedure that we have going on here. We will eventually also disconnect the positive side and just get the whole reserve tank of electrons out of here. Again, looking to make as much space as possible to give us as much working room as we can get. Will also help us pull this particular engine out of here. Now, first thing we're prepping for is, you can see that we've got our radiator cap removed at this point. We're just going to work on getting the antifreeze drained. Now, on these particular Rams, it's right here on the driver's side below. And let me grab a shop light, which I think I might still have underneath here. Yes, we do. And you can see that what we've got set up on the drainage nipple right there, coming off of the bottom of the radiator, and you've probably seen me do this before in other videos, it's just a piece of silicone tubing. The size of this tubing, I'll look at the previous video and see if I can capture what that size was, but I like to do it this way just to keep the antifreeze from hitting the frame rail and spraying all over the place. It just gives you the ability to kind of direct the flow where you need it to go. In this case, it's just going down here in a 5-gallon bucket, and it just helps keep things tidy so you're not spraying fluid all over the place. Now be mindful that draining the radiator will not drain the fluid out of the block. That when we get to tearing apart the big block and making it into a short block, as we crack those cylinder heads loose, we're going to get a lot more coolant that's going to come out of the block still. So just keep that in mind. The drain valve is right here. Let me wake up the viewfinder so I can see, hopefully see what you're seeing. Let me get my finger on it right here. And hopefully you can see that right there. And I found that let me get the size of this particular Allen key that I'm using. Let me get out here in the light so you can actually see this. That is the, looks like it rubbed, the numbers have been rubbed off the back. Is that a 13 or a 15? It's a pretty good size Allen key that gets in there. I thought originally that a 3/8 ratchet end would fit in there, and I tried that, and 3/8 is just a bit too big. Oh, there's some writing. See if we can get you the number of what this is. Yeah, I don't see the size written on that. Is that a 10? Okay, it looks like it's a number 10 metric Allen that fits into that drainage valve on the side. Now, when you're doing the drainage on this, just be careful not to back that valve out too far. Otherwise, that whole plug will come out and you'll drain the radiator relatively quickly. Just trust me on this one. You just want to back it out till it starts to drain, tighten up when you're done, and then we can work on getting the rest of this out of here. So I'm going to work on this. Once this has been drained out, then I'll bring you back for the next piece. So one moment. And welcome back. So as our radiator continues to kind of finish its little drain procedure, as you can see, we went ahead and took some saran wrap or plastic wrap, however you want to call it, and just wrapped our fenders on both sides in lieu of having the actual thrower fender covers. I saw another channel do this a few years ago, so I started kind of doing the same thing. And again, you can see it's just wrapped in several layers of saran wrap, relatively cheap to do, and it does a nice job of protecting the fender. Since we're going to be doing a lot of work on this vehicle, and naturally needing to lean over, the fenders, things of that nature, it does a good job of keep from putting any additional scratches and such in them. Went ahead and just removed the top cover piece and then took our 4 bolts out for our front grille here. And what we're doing to track all of our hardware, as we've done with previous builds on this channel, you can see here we're just going with the tag and bag method, just using some writable freezer Ziploc bags, or the equivalent of, just to put all our bolts in to keep everything nice and organized. Now, what I normally like to do on this front grille assembly is go ahead and loosen all 4 bolts across here. Remember, on this grille, you've got 2 coarse bolts, which will go in the very ends, and you got 2 machine threaded bolts, which go into the upper support here. But rather than grab this grille and just yank on it from the bottom, which you can do, I usually like to just take those 4 bolts on the top, peel it back a little bit. As you can see there, that allows you to get a nice long flat tip screwdriver in there and let's see if I can get you to see it. I'll point at it with the screwdriver. That is the little flap, the little catch on the bottom right there. You can see, hopefully you can see the screwdriver on top of it, and then normally just kind of come this direction with the screwdriver and just wedge it underneath that little clip and kind of work it a little bit as you pull out in front of it. That helps. I find that helps that clip to release, because you can snap these bottom clips off, especially the older this plastic gets. They're kind of prone to breaking if you just grab the front of the grill and yank on it. Let's see. So what I'm going to do here is, and the goal is to see if we can get this core support, this center support again, out of here. So it's going to mean that we've got a hood latch that we're going to disconnect and deal with, the horn assembly. There's a wiring harness that runs on the other side here that we're going to have to just pop these clips out. And we know from the installation of the supercharger kit that this reservoir isn't going to stay here. This is going to get completely removed and replaced with what comes in the kit. So items like this, when we know we remove it, it won't be going back on this particular installation. But we've got a windshield washer reservoir, coolant reservoir, a lock assembly. And what I'll do on this lock assembly, rather than crack those bolts loose from where they're nice and adjusted and the hood shuts well, we'll just disconnect the electrical. We'll come in here like we did when we installed the latch, just manually push that forward. That'll get the cable out. We can detach the cable and just leave the cable in the engine compartment. And we've got a little relay back there. I believe that relay has got to do with the electric cooling fan. Do not quote me on that one. That could also be the relay for the horns as well. Like I said, that's why I say don't quote me on it. And yes, you can see that we've got some mud dauber wasps that have made some pretty good amount of nesting in here. So we'll have to deal with that and make sure that we don't get any unexpected surprises that may hatch out of that later. Although I don't think these are valid anymore because we've run the truck several times since then, which means these guys would have probably got pretty toasty. I'm sure well above their incubation temperature. Anyway, I'm rambling. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to get this front bumper off of here. Just let the radiator continue to drain while we're doing all of this. And then we'll also come back and tackle items like taking the air box out. When we take this air box out, we're going to take the whole box out to include the bottom assembly, because we know that since we're supercharging this and it's going to have duct work that go in and out of the intercooler, none of this is going to go back on. This tube here for the PCV system, obviously the main intake here, and of course the bottom of this box, all of this is going to come out. And it'll stay out. We also know that we're not going to go back in here. Remember, as we spoke about before, with the clutch fan that is on here now and the electrical, we're going to pull all of this out, and it's going to be replaced by the V6 electric fan that'll take the place of this shroud. It'll actually give us a bit more working room in here, because the shroud on the V6 fan, if I remember correctly, doesn't stick as far forward as this factory shroud does here. So we've got some work to do. Like I said, I'm going to get this grill out of here, and then I'll bring you back for the next piece. One moment. And welcome back. So just want to show you, we've got our coolant overflow reservoir removed and drained into our bucket. Nice thing about working on a truck is, and I'll show you this here in a second, built-in storage space. Now we're getting our windshield washer reservoir tank out of here, so I just wanted to point this out, that each one of these reservoirs will hold in by two 10mm bolts. Coolant reservoir, you can see it had one attachment point here, one attachment point here. The windshield washer reservoir had one attachment here, and also one attachment further down here. But this one also has your line for your pump, as well as the fluid level indicator electrical and the pump electrical. So you got two electrical connections and your water line. Now I've cracked these off before, and be careful when you break these open, because if I remember correctly, if this is full, which this one is, even if the pump's not running, if you pull that line off, it'll start kind of just to start shooting fluid all over you, because it will gravity feed out of the tank. So you can see we're just kind of getting our front grill here area bit by bit, just kind of tore apart, taking off the stuff that we don't need, and prep to see if we can work on potentially getting this brace out of here. And it looks like we should be able to do it. The only thing that concerns me is that you can see, even though this piece is bolted into here, that this kind of comes over and clips in place, and this hunk of plastic is all one piece that kind of goes this way and all the way up and kind of in behind where this headlight is at. So getting this brace out of here is gonna be interesting. Yeah, because I don't see another way of doing it, especially with trying to get, you know, this out of here to get this off. I was really hoping we could avoid that, because I don't want to unbolt and remove this entire plastic piece, especially if it's, yeah, it feels like it's all interconnected. Like I said, and kind of just, there's a flap of this that you don't see that's part of this. It just kind of goes up this way. Oh, I guess if we have to, we will, just to get this upper support out of here. Anyway, I'm rambling too much. We'll I guess we'll kind of come to this bridge as we get there. But for now, I'm going to get this windshield washer reservoir out here, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. Well, that is if I can hit the button on the camera. And welcome back. So you can see we're just in the process of getting some more items stripped away from our front grille here. We went ahead and marked the location of the hood latch and removed it. Just pushed the cable off to the side and undid the one electrical connector. That way, as we're reaching over the top or wanting to lean over the top of the hood, you don't have the hood release, you know, digging into your gut, so to speak. We did look into this a little bit more, and this structure piece that would have to come out of here so that this top piece is out of the way so we can then remove this upper bracing. Is going to be a little bit more involved than what I want to get into at this point. It goes down quite a bit, comes around here, snakes around inside the headlight cavity, and ends up right about here. So it looks like it's part of the structure that makes up kind of the right, very much right and left hand sides of the vehicle. So, I mean, you can tear it down and take the front bumper and everything off and remove a bunch of hardware to get this piece out, to then get this piece out. And what we were looking at wanting to do was, once we get the engine hoist in here, raise the engine up just enough to clear this cooler that you see here, which goes to the oil cooler, if I remember correctly. Either oil or power steering, one of the two. I believe this is for power steering. And we would just have to raise the engine block up so that the oil pan cleared this and then pull it out, versus having to raise it all the way up to clear this top bar and then pull it out. And the reason why that might be a concern is it may or may not be a concern because the last time we did this was on the TRX4. If you remember, it had like 32 or 35 inch tires on it, which was sitting quite a high ways up off the ground, and we still had enough throw in our engine hoist to get the engine out. But even though this truck is only sitting on 20s, you have a little bit of extra height because of the ramps it's on. Plus, in order for safety reasons, we got to get the lift up off the ground so we can get the feet of the lift under the front cross member here for the lift. But in order to get on the first set of mechanical locks, you have to probably come up a good 6 to 8 inches from ground level. So all that is adding to the height, and all that kind of takes away from the available throw that we have. So as we start eating up our, height requirement from the ground up because we're on the lift, we may have to get a little bit creative with the chain length on our lift, or I'm sorry, engine hoist, and or use our lift to kind of help us get this engine out of here. Or we may have to bite the bullet and do a really, really in-depth tear down on the left and right hand sides of this vehicle in order to get these side bracing pieces out of here to get this top piece out. I don't know, I understand that this was probably done for the structural integrity of these corners, but it's annoying that this overlaps this. And if it wasn't for this, these two bolts here and this one headlight bolt, you'd be able to get this top brace out of here, of course, once the radiator and everything was out. Either way, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So now that we seem to have most of our coolant drained out at this point, and we've got our coolant overflow and our windshield washer reservoir bottles out of the way, then what we're going to do next is go ahead and close that drain valve below it, and we're going to see about getting the upper and lower radiator hoses out of here. And then we're going to work on getting the cooling fan out of here and get this shroud out of here. So the goal, you can see that I squeezed that radiator hose, and you can now hear some more coolant escaping the radiator. So the goal, I think, is where we may stop with this particular video, is once we get the radiator and the transmission slash air conditioning condenser assembly at least dismounted and kind of pushed out of the way. Then we'll call it a video at that point, and we'll come bring you back for another installment. Let's see. And one thing we will be doing on the air conditioning on this one, just as an FYI, just like we did before, we'll unbolt the air conditioning compressor from the block because it has these flexible lines here, and then we'll just take the compressor like we did before, kind of peel it up out of the way, and potentially just set it right here on the far right hand side, just getting it out of the engine compartment and getting it out of the way, because it is still intact. It does work. It hasn't been discharged, and I really don't want to discharge that system, because it means I'd have to bring it back to a shop that has the capability of drawing it down correctly and recharging it. And you know, that's the cost of refrigerant is pretty pricey these days. If we have to get to it and bring someone out here to discharge the system properly, we will. If not, we're going to try our other method of just, again, peeling the compressor out of the way, and you'll see what I'm talking about when we get to that step. But I'm going to like I said, close the bottom drain valve, get these radiator hoses out of the way, and it's just got these clamps here, pretty standard Chrysler spring clamps. We'll get these hoses out of here, and then we'll look on getting that that cooling fan out of here. Now, below the radiator are these kind of flaps you can see here. They're splash guards, and also as a way to help direct airflow. I'm just in the process of removing these little flaps, because part of the supercharger kit, these flaps either have to be removed or modified, because you're going to have the intercooler, which is going to sit here, and it's going to have coolant piping, which is going to protrude and kind of snake around. I believe in this model it comes up through here, or it may just sit here, and kind of both may feed into, because you can see you got a nice pretty good sized cavity here on the left hand side. I believe they're both just going to go this way, but either way, we have to remove these pieces in order to disconnect them from the shroud to get the radiator shroud out of here. And to do that, I'm just using a trim removal tool to pop loose the little Christmas tree clips that clip it into the front bumper, this center brace here, and then the bottom of the shroud. Again, just pulling Christmas tree clips out, we can get these pieces in the bottom out. So I'm going to continue to work on this, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. You can see that we're just got our lower radiator hose disconnected from our radiator. I'll get you down in there to see that. And we just got it kind of pushed off to the side a little bit, just allowing the frame rail to help direct the flow of coolant. Because again, you will get more coolant out of that lower radiator hose. That it just doesn't gravity feed, you know, enough when you're draining it from the drain valve on the radiator. So just kind of keep that in mind. Just, you know, replace your bucket and just take it easy with the lower hose, and again, use that frame rail to help, you know, let it flow into the bucket, so to speak, rather than all over the floor. So that's where we're sitting. But we're just going to go ahead and continue to try to let that kind of seep out and drain, and then we'll get our upper disconnected, and then we're going to see about getting this fan clutch off of here. It looks like it's definitely been off before, just judging by the witness marks that are on the nut for the fan clutch, as well as, if you see here, there's some dings and dents inside of the air conditioning line, which tells me that somebody had their fan clutch removal tool sitting here, and they hit up against and kind of gouged our AC line a little bit. Either way, minor, but again, we'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we've got the air intake box removed, the old one. Again, frees up a lot of working space. You can get to that upper part of the radiator hose where it goes in a thermostat housing a lot easier with it out of the way. And remember, that entire box and assembly won't be going back in. It's going to be replaced by intercooled ducting for the supercharger. So we're just in the process of working on this fan clutch now. So I've got two tools to aid in this. One's a fan clutch tool, and the other one is one of these big old multi-purpose, I think this is put out by, does it even say who this put out by? Anyway, you can pick this up at an auto parts store. It's got a 35mm end and a 47mm end for getting on the nut that attaches to the clutch, which is part of the fan. And this is just meant to hold the water pump pulley in place so that we can spin it. Now, I'm going to see if I can get you in there to see this before, but what I have to do is, because there's no like little points to grab a hold of with that tool, is I've got 2 bolts that are threaded through some bolt holes in the tool that then go in the 2 holes and the water pump pulley. And you may not be able to see that in the camera view, but with those 2 bolt holes going through 2 of the holes in the outer and inner diameter of that pulley, that's going to allow us to hold that pulley steady while we work on that fan clutch nut on the outside. And I'll show it to you more when we get out of there, because it'll be easier to see it, but you can definitely tell that somebody's had that off before. I really hope that means it'll break free, hopefully relatively easily. Hopefully not give us a fight, because sometimes those things can be a bit of a bear, depending on whether or not somebody, you know, put the full 300-pound, you know, impact or ultra long pry bar on it when they were tightening back up. But we shall see. So again, just kind of working this tool in conjunction with that one. And my experience on these, and this has been the same even for the 2500s, that at least so far these that I've dealt with have always been reverse threaded, meaning you tighten them up to loosen them, and you would loosen them to tighten them. So what we want to do is basically act like we're going to be tightening it, and then that should hopefully break it free for us. So I'm going to go ahead and work on that. Oh, and on this hose, these can be a little bit of a bear, because they like to, depending on how long they've been in place, and judging by the factory markings on these hoses, it looks like they're the original ones that came with the truck. So they can have a pretty good seal, especially on these metal items. Now, if you got a hose pick, use a hose pick by all means, especially if you have to reuse that hose. In our case, if you remember from the parts videos, we're going to be replacing all the coolant hoses in here. So what I did to get the seal broken off of that one a bit easier, and again, I don't suggest that you do this, especially if you have to reuse the hose, was just take a little bit of a box cutter and just make a little slice down the end of it, and then peel back the edge of that, and that'll break that seal from off that metal. And again, only doing that because we're going to be replacing all the coolant hoses as part of this build. Again, if you have to do that, you know, then by all means you can grab the hose and try to twist it to break the seal, or if you got a hose pick, you can kind of get it at the end of it, hook it on the inside, and kind of go around the diameter of it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and work on trying to get this fan clutch out of here, and I'll bring you back and let you know how much of a bear it was. One moment. And welcome back. So we did get it to break free, but I wanted to show you kind of what the setup is, or at least what I use. So this is the OEM adjustable fan clutch tool that you see here. Flip that around for you, sorry for the noise. Part number 27270, and that's what I do. I just thread a couple of screws through it, fix it with some bolts, and these are what go through the little holes in the water pump that I'll show you here when we get a better view of it. So this is used to hold that pulley in place, and then we fish this down on the little bit of space that's left between the fan shroud and that hold down tool to get it onto that nut. And basically you're just holding in place with this one, and then we're tightening with this one. And in our case, we tighten and loosen. Your fan clutch could be different, so make sure you look at your documentation. And we were able to get this to pop loose. The other thing that we did, just to show you, let me grab a light here. We removed the lower fan shroud already, which is this piece here. There you go. And the way that comes off is, you see that little tabs here internally in the center. Underneath on the bottom of the fan shroud, hopefully you can see that here. You see these little holes here at the bottom. You have to push in on the little tabs on these, and then at the same time you kind of have to push it on these tabs and pull out on these tabs, and that will get this lower piece to release. And once it releases, it just slightly pushes forward, and the bottom part, the whole bottom part of this will get exposed, as you can see here. So now, with that lower fan shroud removed, you've got all this space that you can get up in there and then spin that fan clutch off. And to show you that it is free, and like I said, you kind of have to forgive the camera work. There it goes. And you can see I can get in there and I can spin that now. And it is a reverse thread on this one. There we go. So once you get it loose enough, normally you can kind of just spin the fan. And you can see I'm going in the direction it would be as if you were going to tighten it. Now, once this comes off, be careful. You don't want the weight of this falling forward and, you know, damaging something on the radiator. Now, you got, in this particular truck, you have an electric fan in front of it, so that's gonna kind of guard your radiator a little bit. But in the event that you don't, and you can see, and I'll show you when we get this off of here, that somebody has definitely been in here before, because it looks like maybe they did us a favor and put a little bit of lubrication on those threads, which is very nice of the previous person. They didn't have to do that, because they did actually break. Oh yeah, they got some kind of grease or lubrication on it. They definitely had this off before, which was nice, because it made getting this thing off a lot easier than it could have been. Again, forgive the camera work. Crawl from underneath here. So there we go. There's our fan clutch. So I mean, there's a little bit of resistance left in that, but yeah, and you can see the oil. So somebody did put some kind of lubrication on this. And just to show you, you can see those rust spots in there where it looks like somebody may have had a hold of it with a pipe wrench in the past. You can see they've gnarled up the shoulder of that bolt. So yeah, like I said, somebody fought with this thing in the past, but at least they were decent enough to do us a solid and make sure that it didn't seize up on there again. Now, the reason why I'm commenting on here, it feels like there's a little bit of resistance in there, but not as much as it should be, is that when this truck is started, this fan feels like it's running at basically its full speed, which it shouldn't be doing. And usually that's an indication that this clutch has gone bad and the fan's just spinning at full bore, because it should allow a little bit of a slip in here where this fan isn't running at full speed, until the RPM of the engine comes up. And of course you've got a little piece of thermistor in there too, so heat also does play into that. But either way, now that we've gotten this off, remember, this won't be going back on there. That'll be going away completely. We won't be going back with a mechanical clutch driven mechanical fan. We're going to go with that V6 fan. Which is the electric fan. What we're going to do next is go ahead and get our radiator bolts off for the shroud, for the left and right hand side of our shroud, and finish getting the rest of our shroud out of here. So let me go ahead and take the bolts loose from here, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our fan shroud out. Again, it's just the 2 bolts on either side, and you have to finagle it a little bit, but you can just pull it out without having to take this electric fan out with it in one piece. But speaking of this electric fan, remember, at least on the 1500s I've dealt with, there is a metal clip at the bottom of this, that secures this to the radiator. So we're going to make sure that we pop that out, which in that case, actually, you can see that the last person that was in here did put the clip back in. So either way, it's missing on this one, but there may be a metal clip here that you got to pop out and remove. And let's get your top side. You can see our fan shroud there. And while we're looking at it, just to show you that lower piece, we're going to reattach it so we don't misplace it. But this lower piece is going to come in and can see where the sides of it fit up into the sides of the shroud. There and over here. And then it just tilts forward. And you can see where these collars are going to lock it in place. There we go. So if you're underneath the truck and you'd be looking at it this way, what you have to do is, let's make sure those are in there and seated they are, is kind of push in or pull out, I found, on this piece, while at the same time pulling up on this tab here. So kind of manipulate these two areas. Let me spin this around because this will be easier to see. Sorry, it's hard to do this one-handed and hold the camera at the same time. So if we do that and just kind of pull out on this, push down on this piece, or pull up on this piece and push out on this piece, you can see it'll disengage. We can do the same thing here. You can kind of pull out on this one. You can see me pull out on this one to clear that tab, and then you just pull up on this one, disengage it, pull it forward, and that piece will come back out. And that allows you to gain access to remove the fan once you have it broken free, as well as if you have to change your belt. It's much easier if you remove just that lower part, not the entire shroud, but again, just that lower part of the shroud. Gets you much better access to your accessory belt in the event that you have to change it. Let's see, yep, and they're missing the clip on top, so somebody has definitely been in here before. We have our electrical for our fan disconnected over here. That's that big old 2-position connector there. Interesting enough though, you notice the wiring harness going 2, it's 3 wire, but they're only using 2 on the fan itself. Now there's some little tabs here that normally you just have to kind of push back on, get them to unseat, and you kind of have to work both of them at the same time because you'll see the weight of the fan will try to get it to drop back in. But you just push back on both of these. Well, there you go. We can get that one out, and then we can come back over here, do the same thing here, push back on this tab, push, pull up, and there we go. And this is what would be called the condenser fan. Some call it an auxiliary cooling fan. It is part of your cooling system. It will come on if the engine reaches above a certain temperature, because then the ECU will think that something has happened to the mechanical fan and you're not getting enough cooling. Or if you're towing or under heavy loads, or if you turn the air conditioner on, then this fan will come on automatically again to provide additional cooling for the vehicle. Now this is also a piece, if you remember, that will not be going back into this truck on reassembly. We have the much bigger, much wider, much beefier electric fan mod that we'll be doing to this one. So that one electric fan that came out of a V6 1500 will take the place of this fan and that mechanical fan. So the nice thing is we get rid of a little bit of parasitic draw that the mechanical fan puts on the motor. But as you can see here, we're making some headway. We're getting a lot more stuff cleared out of the way. We're getting more and more available working space, which should make getting things a little bit easier. And yes, before we start disconnecting the electrical connections, which will come in future videos, I'm going to charge up the label printer. And I'm just going to craft some labels to kind of just to label our wiring here real quick. Again, the older the wiring harness, the more it kind of has a memory. And as you lay it down on the motor, it'll kind of line up to where it needs to go. But considering we're going to have this engine tore apart for a while, I'm just going to go ahead and label, temperature sensors, label basically all the electrical connectors on it, so there's no doubt when we go back to reassembly what goes where. Let's see, next thing we want to do is we got our hoses disconnected. We can go ahead now and undo the fasteners for our radiator on our left and right hand sides. And we got some bracing that also attaches our condenser slash transmission cooler to the front of our radiator. So we've got some bolts to remove. So we'll be doing that, and then we'll work on getting the rest of this radiator out of here. So just one moment, I'll bring you right back. So again, bolt here, and if you look on the side here, you've got some piping for air conditioning as well as transmission cooler, which bolt to the side of the radiator, and of course the bracing here. So it looks like we've got we've got 4 screws or bolts on this side that deals with the mounting the pipes or piping, and then yeah, 1 2 3 4, which is bracing, piping, and then we've got the 2 bolts atop, and this end it just slips into here. So once we get this radiator over and out, we should be able to just kind of cock it to the side and then pull it out. Now there'll be a little bit of coolant in here, so keep that in mind. That what's going to happen is we kind of have our bucket in place. We'll try to catch it if we can, but we're probably going to spill some on the floor because there's going to be some coolant in this radiator that more than likely didn't completely drain. So I'm going to tackle this and I'll bring right back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our main bolts out at the top. We got our 2 bolts here that hold these braces for the condenser slash transmission cooler to the frame of the radiator. We also got our 2 bolts out, one here that goes forward, another one that comes from the side, which takes care of the transmission lines. So the AC lines have been unbolted from the radiator, and the transmission lines have been unbolted from the radiator. So to show you what that hardware looks like, that's for the radiator itself, left and right hand sides. These are for the braces that are on that condenser slash transmission cooler. And these are the bolts for hold the piping in place, again, for that air conditioning lines and the transmission cooling lines. So now we've got all that out of here, and we've got our lines out of the way, and I did go ahead and unplug our electrical connector from our air conditioning pressure switch, just to allow us some additional movement within these lines, just so we can kind of clear everything. And as you can see, we've got the radiator out of the support down here at the bottom. We just need to pop the other radiator support out here on the other side, make sure we clear all our wiring, and then we should be able to lift this bad boy out of here, you know, mud dauber nests and all. And I'll more than likely just set this outside in case any critters do decide to start hatching out of there. I don't want them in the garage, let alone in the garage, but we're trying to work on this. So just want to show you that again. Just it does come out, I want to say, fairly easy once you have enough working room. Just be mindful of all your extra lines that are bolted to the body of this radiator, and just kind of take your time with it, and it'll come out of there. So I'm going to go ahead and finish taking this out, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we've got our radiator out at this point. Went ahead and also disconnected our lower radiator hose from our water pump. Just go ahead and get that out of here. Again, I just made a little cut in the hose to break up the tension, because once again we are replacing all the radiator hoses in here, as well as, you know, water pump and everything else. Pretty much as we can put back on new is going to go back on new. Let's see, we've got the radiator here. Went ahead and finished just draining it in our bucket, and the reason why the bucket looks all murky, nasty, and oil in it, don't worry, it didn't come out of the truck looking that way. There was some existing sludge in this bucket when I used it to drain it, because again, I wasn't planning on reusing the antifreeze, but I usually use this bucket to flush all the old stuff of the vehicles I'm working out of, so it had some residual gunk in it. And then we'll usually just cap this up until it's full, and then we'll take it down to hazardous waste for recycling. So again, just wanted to comment, that's why you're seeing the oil and the murk in there. It's just from a previous vehicle. It didn't come out of this one looking that way, trust me. Now, even though we're getting rid of the hoses, since we're going to replace the hoses, I did rescue and keep the band clamps off of those hoses in the event that hopefully they can be reused on the new ones, because we went with Gates hoses on it because they were available. I couldn't get the OEM hoses, and so I'm just going to reuse these clamps instead of using the worm or screw type clamps. These, my understanding, have a little bit better overall equal clamping force. And since these were on the truck, which look, again, these have part numbers on them, they look like they're the original hoses. You know, these lasted since 2012. They should continue to last us even on newer hoses. So we're going to reuse those. We're going to go ahead and get rid of those. And just to show you here what line, again, just made a little cut in the bottom of that just to separate that from the water pump housing. Again, don't cut them, obviously, if you're going to reuse them. Yeah, if you're going to reuse them, don't cut them. Remember, we're replacing in this one, so no harm, no foul. Same with the radiator. I am going to go ahead and just kind of set this outside and just get this prepped. Usually what will happen in my area is that since this is aluminum, normally the scrap metalers, if I just kind of set this to the curb next weekend with the other garbage, what will normally happen is usually the scrap metalers will come around and they'll just go ahead and pick this up and sell it for scrap, you know, which is fine by me. I've got no issue. Somebody else, you know, wants to go ahead and grab a hold of it and turn it in for a couple bucks, you know, more power to them. It saves me from having to take this down to a recycling center as well. So we're going to go ahead and just get this, hold on to this for a little bit. Like I said, I am going to store it outside though, just so it's not in here. And I think at this point, this is where I promised we would stop the video. Enough of my rambling at this juncture. You can see we've got the air cleaner removed. Pretty much all of the cooling system is out of here at this point, with the exception of the water pump. When we come back, we will work on getting, we'll get this accessory belt off. We'll start taking the accessories like the tensioner. We'll see if we can get the power steering pump unbolted and just kind of maybe pushed off here at the side, which is what we normally do with it, just to get it out of the way. We'll also get the air conditioning pump unbolted from the timing cover as well as the block, and again see if we can just kind of swing it here out of the way. And once we have that done, we have to take the intake off of it at that point in order to get enough room to basically lift the engine up and out of here. So we got accessories, we've got intake, we've got the brake booster that still needs to come out of here. We've got plenty of work underneath the truck still to do yet. We need to get the exhaust manifold collectors unbolted. We need to get the flex plate unbolted from the torque converter. So we got, like I said, we got quite a bit of work yet before we'll be ready to pull this engine out of here. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut the video at this point because I think it's getting on kind of long enough with my rambling. We'll get this posted and we'll get the next one up here shortly. But with that being said, if you have not subscribed, please consider to do so. Thank you to everybody that has done that thus far. As far as how you can best support the channel at this point in the game, I've been asked that question a couple of times now. The best thing you could do at this point, it doesn't cost you anything, is just let the ads run. That's how we creators get paid. I have been asked about setting up a merchandise line and things of that nature, and it's just not something that I'm really wanting to get into at this point. Maybe in the future. Again, it's kind of a strong maybe. I prefer that I don't want to put undue pressure on individuals thinking that they have to join a membership or that they have to buy something from a merch store. I'm happy with the way it's currently set up, which is you subscribe, it doesn't cost you anything. Let the ads run, again, doesn't cost you anything. My goal with this channel is to have the knowledge out there. I don't want to make anybody feel they have to, pay the information back. Think of this channel as, at least as of right now, think of this channel as kind of a library. You can go to a library, you can check out a book. Normally doesn't cost you anything, maybe just a little bit of your time. And then when you're done, you gain some knowledge and you return your book. With that being said, I will let you go. Again, if you subscribed already, thank you immensely. If you have not, consider to do so, and I will let you go and bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye.